I want you to move from overwhelmed by information to confident in what really matters. I want to help you move from being unsure towards direction and purpose in your healthcare. I want to introduce you to health experts. I want to let you in on tough conversations on women's health. I want to give you a place where you can lean in and learn how to take care of yourself. Let's transform your health. Let's get clear on your goals. This is Women's Health Unplugged. I'm your host, Dr. Jordan Robertson, naturopathic doctor. Welcome to another episode of season 2, we're calling it season 2, of Women's Health Unplugged. I'm joined today by Holly Baxter. I'm so excited for us to have this conversation, Holly. I've been following you online for such a long time. We just recently got connected over a couple of podcast episodes that we had done that you had found. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I know I was just casually going for a bit of a walk one day and was just browsing through podcasts, and I'm like, this looks like fun. So here we are. And then I noticed that you guys follow my husband and I had to connect. I think it's so nice to find other women in the clinical space that are really putting themselves out there and sharing all the good stuff. So yes, I'm all for connecting with other women.
It's amazing. And what I love about your work and you, and I mentioned this right before we hit record, is I do find that for women in science, you're often looking to the men to lead the way, right? I follow your husband, Layne Norton. I follow like all of these men who are big players in the nutritional space. And there aren't that many women who are in that space. And I do find that the conversation around women's health and nutrition and exercise physiology tends to have this kind of fluffy, non-scientific air about it. And when I found you, I was like, oh, thank goodness, right? Like there is this woman who is willing to live in logic, right? Willing to live in the science around female nutrition and exercise physiology. That's what drew me to you in the first place. So I'm so excited to have you here to have a bit of a conversation about this, because I know our listeners would really benefit from this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I totally agree with you. I think it was really intimidating when I first started kind of getting my feet wet in the evidence-based space in the community, because it was so overpowered with males. So I think, like, first and foremost, you have to have a big personality to even want to dabble with that group of people. And then, to be taken seriously especially in the bodybuilding community, because that's really, how I've gotten into that space, not because I have the desire to be, this jacked, muscular dude, but, the principles are evidently the same. So I think for other women to, take you for face value and really look up and respect the information that you're sharing, it feels very difficult because we're so used to going to men as an authority figure. But I know there's so many talented women out there. We just have to keep supporting one another so that we can get our information out there, because I think we bring such a different piece to the story that's being told and to the information that we already know about science.
Which kind of brings me to what I wanted to chat about. And I do want to hear your story for how you got to this space, because you have so many accomplishments and you have so many projects on the go that I want to hear about that too. But, when we think about the things I wanted to talk about with you, they actually do live in that duality of how do we hold space for mental health and wellness and help women reach their happiness goals. And let's talk about nutrition, body composition, metabolism, and the science behind some of those pieces that impact women on a day-to-day basis. It can definitely feel like we maybe can't hold both of those goals at the same time. But I think you do it well. And I think you probably would agree with me that we can think about both of those things at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. I do think that there is a huge gap in the literature, to be quite honest with you. I think there's a lot of work being done on, nutrition science, exercise physiology, hypertrophy. And then over on the other side, there's a lot of information coming out, in the neuropsychology space and mental health and well-being. So, there's a lot of good stuff going on, but there isn't a whole lot of interlap at the moment. And just quietly, I may actually be stepping away from all of our business stuff and going back to do some research in that specific topic. And I think, when I talk a little bit about my history and why I am here today, I think this is just like, I feel like I finally worked out what my purpose is. So, having that nutrition background, and I think for a lot of us, and we said off air earlier, like I found myself thriving in nutrition and, exercise, and how can I manipulate this and how can I control my body? And I think part of that was, being done to support my mental health. I thought, well, this is going to help me feel better about my body. And it can be. And I think making sure that you're getting your information from credible sources is so important. But then one of the things that I did really, really terribly was neglect my mental health. There is a lot of stigma. There's a lot of pressure from society to, focus on these things. And there just wasn't the support when I was growing up, or the resources or tools available online to kind of, do it yourself. So I think something that I really want to cover today with you would be to discuss, the importance of bringing that element of mental health into the picture, because you can achieve ultimately the same outcomes if happiness or a sense of belonging and value and credibility. All of those things can be accomplished not by obtaining a really lean physique or, being the best in this sport, but by working from, the mental health side too.
I love that. I know we don't often talk about the cost of any of the things that we're doing, right? In the pursuit of health, or the with the eye on the prize, whatever we've made that out to be. We don't think about the cost of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love for you to share kind of what that experience was like for you. And how that's led to this. I was gonna say, it's not a quiet announcement when you do it on a podcast that gets downloaded by thousands of people that you're stepping back to go back into. Just a quietly gonna mention.
I told my husband about a week ago, and he was like, okay, we need to discuss this again. And then I brought it up again. He's like, okay, so you are serious about it, but we'll take
Now it's for reals.
Oh dear.
So can you walk us through, Holly, what that experience and that, because I think your story is quite compelling, right? Because I mean, and I'll say from the outside, you are just beautiful and like have this spectacular physique, and you compete and all of those things. And I think, having you be able to share that actually lands so beautifully for women, because you've lived lots of sides of this coin. I would love to hear what your personal journey has been.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess just for those that don't know who or what it is I do, similar to yourself, I guess I would say that I am a nutrition educator. I have a bachelor's in food science and nutrition and a master's in dietetics. And I did all my schooling over in Australia. So I went to Deakin University. So I guess I found myself in that space. And this is probably a really important piece of the puzzle. Out of what I will say, I had an eating disorder when I was about 15 years old. So at the time, I was incredibly competitive. I ran track and actually had one of the best coaches in Australia coaching me. He's I won't say names, but he was the coach of Olympic track sprinter Kathy Freeman, who was an Olympic 400-meter gold medalist. She's very successful. Everybody knows her in Australia. Anyhow, he would always, I know that he was meaning to do the right thing and he was trying to motivate me and inspire me, but he would compare me to, Kathy Freeman. And one of the things that he would say would always be to do with body composition. And I was not an overweight kid, but I wasn't as muscular as Kathy. She was several years older than me. And, he said it so many times, I think, that he kind of just made me feel like I wasn't good enough in the body that I was. And that kind of just led to this spiraling, disordered eating behavior. And I think that, coupled with some fairly traumatic experiences that I had when I was a young girl, really just put me in this really dark place. And I've shared this openly before, but I struggled with depression. I actually tried to attempt or suicide twice when I was young. So I have been in a really, really bad place as a teenager. And I never really went out of my way to get the psychological support that I should have done. I think now looking back as a woman, and I have two, young kids, I'm a stepmom, and I cannot believe that, the things that I have now endured that I didn't go and get help for. Like if that happened to my kids, I'd be like, oh my God, like that's so traumatic. Like, how have you lived with this? And I have to now, as a 33-year-old woman, say, all these things are starting to make sense. I'm very, I think I now look at myself with a little bit more compassion. I tried to previously push it all down. I kind of lived in denial of all of these things, but I never really understood how much they were impacting my day-to-day life. So I lived and suffered with an eating disorder for about 15 years. And thinking that I had the due diligence, I was doing the work, I had the capacity and the willpower to just brutally get through it. Like, I will be able to fix this. This is just going to go away. And it doesn't go away unless you proactively choose to work through that. So after getting my nutrition degree and did my master's, I kind of walked away from all of that, feeling like I knew something, but not enough. And just in my career, I started working with athletes, and I kind of found myself in the bodybuilding space. And it was almost like an excuse or a justification for continuing the bad habits that I had with my disordered eating. So now I could say, well, I'm competing in a show. I can manipulate, I can restrict, I can, go crazy with my activity because that's what this sport requires, and then it became okay. So I, found myself in that industry for all the wrong reasons. And I truly think that I believed that being leaner was going to make me happy, that it was going to be, would make me a valuable person in the community, that people would take me seriously. And like we just spoke about, being a female in this industry, I really felt like if someone wants to listen to me and take me seriously, then I'm going to have to look a certain way. It's like you wouldn't trust a skinny chef. Why would you trust, an overweight dietitian, to preach, a healthy body or, achieve an ultimate physique? So there was a lot of like internal pressure to stay that way. And I allowed that to kind of be the driving force for a very long time. And I never really did the psychological work that could have helped me feel a whole lot better without all of the physical like torture really that we put our bodies through.
I hear so many parallels in your story with like the, other women's stories, right? There was the person you trusted, who you looked up to, who, whether through intention or not, their words stuck in a way that then became this, this driving force towards unhealthy or disordered behavior, right? I think of all the women in my office who say, well, I want to lose weight because I'm worried about what my husband thinks. Or I want to lose weight because, my mom has said this, or my grandma pinched my rolls, or whatever it was, right? It's that person in power that, especially at that young age, when, that we're forming that part of our brain that's like, who am I? Where am I? Where do I sit in the world? What's important? That those things stick with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it really wasn't until I started intentionally looking out for, ways to improve my mental health that things actually started to get better. So for the people that I work now with that are, specifically focusing on diet and exercise, because there is a lot of amazing information out there now that enables people to do it in a safe and an effective way that is sustainable. So there's still so much knowledge to be able to share with people, but I think we need to spend an equal amount of time integrating into our practices how to support a healthy mind and a healthy mindset. So that's definitely a big part of what I like to do with clients now.
And how did you get through it? And maybe how do you support your clients? Because when I'm thinking about that like Venn diagram of your life at that time, you had your history, but then also your industry. Like that doesn't feel like there was a safe space anywhere in that. And that would have taken such strength for you to be the one that was going to be different and to search for different. How did you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the biggest thing for me was when I started looking into the research in neuropsychology and the plasticity of our minds. And I found a wonderful, I guess, researcher. Her name's Dr. Caroline Leaf. I actually got to see her speak recently at the Dave Ramsey Summit in Orlando, which was amazing. And yeah, she's done a lot of research, I think, over the space of about 30 years on changing your thoughts, changing your mind, and then over time, that change in, I guess, mindset changes your behavior, it influences your character, and then now you're this new individual. And she's done a lot of work in people with depression and anxiety, and being able to work through with some cognitive behavioral therapies to really change people's perspective on life and radically improve their symptoms of anxiety and depression. So I started reading. I really just took on anything that I could. I was sitting in PubMed. I have a search that is set up specifically for, mental health and anything to do with body image and body positivity. So I really, in any free time that I had, I just took it upon myself to make that a priority. I started saying no to social things. I started really, thinking about what I wanted in my life. And I truly had the desire to be happy. I wanted to live a happier life. I wanted to have and find greater purpose to my life. And I think for the longest time, I kind of just hopped around from, state to state. It was like I was on a search for my purpose. And it started, I grew up in Tasmania. I left home and went to school in Melbourne looking for this, like, what is this thing that I'm missing? Why don't I feel, whole or complete? And then I'm in America. And I actually had a bit of a spiritual, I guess, undertaking. And as somebody that grew up agnostic, I now am spiritual. I attend a local church, which has just been amazing for me. And then that coincided with just the extra reading in my spare time and just connecting with different experts in that field. That work has been incredible. And I also have a therapist that I work with every week and have been working with her for about 2 weeks now.
Amazing. And so it's really like it's that dedication and consistency piece, right? That carves the canyon or whatever metaphor we want to use there. It was like it's the showing up with that like intention every day. Because I'm sure not every day was, you're not hitting it out of the park every day in the last few years on this quest to better mental health. But it's that continuous being able to show up. That's almost like that athlete mentality. You just applied it to pursuing better mental health.
Mm-hmm. So I think that one of the things that a lot of people assume is that when you undertake this process of rewiring your mind, you start getting some therapy, you maybe start following a couple of new, educators online and getting their information, and you can apply these practical like tools and strategies, but you are not cured, like overnight. And I think, like you were saying, when you have this athletic, background and you're very competitive and driven, and I know for me, I am a perfectionist, like type A. I'm very systematic. I think for some reason I just thought that I would be able to fix this, overnight. And like, who are we kidding? Like, I've had this for 15 years. Of course, you're not going to like recover from all of that, in a matter of weeks, months, or days. So it was really nice to have like an external, support to kind of remind me of that. It's like, hey, Hals, you're a really intelligent person, but what makes you think that this is going to be, the easiest thing to overcome? You've got years of like neurological patterns and pathways that you've developed, and it's going to take a lot of time to undo all of these. So it's almost like you'll make these mistakes. And previously, especially when it comes to like something like binge eating disorder, I'm not sure if you have any listeners that have struggled with that, but that was a really huge component of my eating disorder, and it was followed up with purging. And I think the biggest thing was deciding first and foremost, I'm no longer going to have purging as an outlet. It's not going to happen. I'm never doing this again. And I think from that day on, and that was probably about 3 years ago now, I never have. But it was one of the key points in ceasing the binge behavior, because it was almost like the purging it made it okay. It's all right. You can eat, this whole tub of ice cream, or you can eat this whole packet of cereal because you've got this out. Or I could always go and do more exercise. So when I kind of gotten to the point with my career where I was already, up to my eyeballs in work, I had no more hours in the day to, go and do an extra run or make up for it. And I wasn't going to put myself through that physical trauma anymore of purging. I really had to stop and slow down around my eating. And I think stopping and slowing down is so important for everybody, regardless of what your, struggles are, because just bringing yourself to that, like to the present moment, being aware, and then eating with intention and mindfulness. That whole concept to me did not exist prior to me really wanting to start working through that disorder. So one of the things that I think was incredibly helpful was just, every time I have a meal occasion, it was slowing down and being present for that meal, not eating while I'm trying to take a phone call, not eating as I'm walking around the kitchen doing something else. Like, I had to stop myself so that I wasn't distracted. And then I use the hunger fullness scale to kind of help guide my eating decisions, rather than just rushing and almost eating unconsciously. It's like you can be so frazzled that it's just you're on autopilot. So I had to kind of slow down and bring myself back to that awareness. And that scale is fantastic because you use, on a scale of 1 to 10, your current level of hunger, where, I decide, okay, on a 1 to 10, how hungry am I right now? And if that's like a 6, cool. And where would I like to be when I finish that meal? So I would kind of prepare a meal that I thought would be reasonable to get me to that place. And then when I finish the meal, then I would use the fullness scale. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how full am I? And then, I could kind of make a decision, well, do I want to eat more? And then if I found myself thinking about eating more, then I would really have to look at, okay, why are you wanting to eat more? And then, using the 4, I guess, key reasons that most people tend to eat, which is your physiological hunger. Then we would have our environmental cues, our hunger cues, our social cues, and then our emotional cues. And I think for a lot of the times when I found myself wanting to eat more than what you would normally, consume in a normal meal, it was usually emotional. It wasn't actually hunger. So I really struggled with emotional eating. I had no coping tools for dealing with stress, anxiety, and the more busy my career got, the more responsibilities that I had, family, businesses, the worse it got. And I never learned how to cope with those things. The only thing that I knew was through food. So, it was, all of these things were kind of happening at the same time and felt totally out of control. But it's something that does take a really long time to work through.
And I think that's maybe my favorite thing that you just said there was around even reflecting on how many of those tools, whether they're as intense as they were then, but they're still part of your life and your daily practice. I think sometimes, when we look at someone who seems like they have it all together, we forget that they're moving through a process and they have their demons and they have their story. We kind of imagine that they landed there, right? Whether it was through luck or I don't know what. And that sort of comparison game that women play, I think, can keep it stuck. They imagine no step I could take right now would even get me close to going over there. So I guess I won't do anything. Right. And I think that's why it's important to share those stories around what looks and like in the day-to-day experience of other women, because it allows women to see themselves in those moments and go, you know what, like I can actually do things every day too that actually move me forward. But the other piece I wanted to mention on there is that we still are looking for that quick fix. And I want to circle to some of your expertise in nutrition and cyclical nutrition and dieting and reverse dieting. it's so common for us to think about our plans as this like temporary thing that we do, and then we'll be cured, right? Like all I have to do is this gratitude journal for like 6 weeks, and then everything will be fine. Right?
Yeah,
When
it's
it's like that health is a practice.
yeah, it is funny that we all have this crazy, unrealistic expectation of, how fast a diet is going to work. And it is all about consistency. And I think, as somebody that has tried, I am no different to anybody else in this journey. I've tried multiple different diets, and I'm sure you have too, to kind of experiment with what you really like. And for me, before I acquired some knowledge about dieting and learning that really outside of calorie balance, if you're hitting a good amount of protein, the remaining carbohydrates and fat calories from the foods that you eat, that balance really doesn't matter. So when I knew that, and it took down all the barriers to the different, specific diet types. So, I had tried the ketogenic diet. I had tried intermittent fasting. I had tried eliminating, various types of foods, even down to like removing all of my favorite, sweets and treats and like, the decadencies that you really enjoy. So I have done probably just as many different diet strategies and meal plans as the next person. And I think that that's an important part of that, learning experience. It's like you trial and then, maybe you have a win. Sometimes you try something and it completely fails, but that's all really good feedback that we can use, for future, strategies in dieting. And I have finally gotten to the point personally where my meal occasions are so like bizarre, and I don't really need to eat like a breakfast meal at breakfast anymore. Like I'm somebody that doesn't get super hungry in the morning. I don't eat my first meal until much later in the morning, and it might be like a hot dish of sorts. And that for me has found to be more satiating. And I really enjoy that so much more than I guess trying to fit in, specific foods that are like socially accepted breakfast foods, or, trying to have, I don't know, sweet things that were like macro friendly. I remember when the protein bars kind of started coming out, and they were all like new and exciting, and it was like eating a candy bar. And I tried to have like 2 or 3 of those in a day because I just was like, wow, this is so tasty and that it works with my macros. Woo! Not really thinking about the consequences of it doesn't have any dietary fiber, it doesn't have any iron, I'm going to start feeling terrible. There's no satisfaction in this because the meal volume is so small. So, I've done everything and finally come back to a place where I can incorporate, anything that I want. But it's all about, I guess, balancing it out with foods that also are nutritious and, help to feel, help you feel full. So, yeah, I think all to say, everybody struggles with, I guess, finding the right approach, but consistency really is the key. And a lot of us will, it's almost like you kind of binge and purge through your week. And if you're not consistent and you're doing really well 5 days of the week, and then you've got a couple of days over the weekend where you don't track, or, you really eat an excessive amount of food, you can undo a lot of the work that's being done through the week. And it can feel like, you're working so hard, but then why am I not making any progress? So I think there's so much value in learning about the composition and the constituents within the foods that you enjoy. I think there's a lot of value in tracking macros, because it is so accurate compared to some of the other approaches. But that's not for everybody either. So I think, that's really intimidating and time consuming for some people. So for anybody listening, I think it's really important to decide like what do you enjoy eating, and what can you do consistently? And then we've got to work out how we can fit that into your individual goals. And for those people that are trying to undertake fat loss, it's not saying that you have to cut out, all alcohol. It's not us saying you cannot have any, calorie dense foods or takeout or going out and enjoying something fun with your family and friends. It's about, how can I work my calories in a way throughout the week that would permit me to do that. So there's value in planning. There's value in, thinking about, okay, if I know I'm going to be going out for dinner on Friday or Saturday night, and I'd like to be able to have X, Y, Z, and this is what those calories are worth, what would I have to do, earlier in the day? Or if it's a lot of calories, what might I have to do for a couple of days leading up to that to permit it? So it's really trying to, practice some flexibility, be able to pivot when you need to, so that you can still have, enjoyment and satisfaction from the foods that you eat.
Yeah, I think that budgeting kind of like we learn that, right? Like we learned about nutrition from our guardians or parents or grandparents or people who fed us when we were kids, right? We didn't learn about the budget of caloric intake or any of those pieces or any of that Venn diagram around, it's not just your hunger cues, it's also your emotion. It's also your partner eating a bag of chips beside you. It's also, right? We didn't learn any of that, and yet food and nutrition feels like something that should be so intuitive. And so I think people do rely on a lot of their like background knowledge and their past failures to kind of dictate what's possible for them rather than realizing that there are so many other ways to do it. It's funny, one of the things I was thinking about when you're talking there, like when I've had to cut weight, because I am trying to, I shouldn't say I'm trying to, my coach will kill me. I am competing as a masters Olympic lifting competitor these days. So I had to cut weight to get weight class. And funny because my diet gets shittier and shittier as I get closer to my ideal weight for lifting because I don't like it. I don't like living in that body weight category at all. And so my diet goes from this beautiful Mediterranean diet where I maybe sit a little fluffy and a little bit high on my, from a weightlifting perspective, down to like Diet Coke and, diet potato chips and diet ice cream because I hate my life, right? Trying to get into my weight class.
Yeah,
And
well, I guess like,
but that's the only way, like, it's the only way that I can actually make it happen. And it's so for sport, right? Like it's not, and I'm sure my performance suffers from all my Diet Coke and chips, but it's that is not like in the pursuit of health at all. And I think sometimes we can get those two things quite confused.
yeah, absolutely. And I will kind of second that insofar as the sport that I've competed in. Some of the most incredible physiques that I have competed on stage with and people that I have coached have been like in some of the worst like mental states that I have ever witnessed. Yet to the the naked eye and to the people around them, because it's not really being shared what's going on internally, it's like this, wow, I admire to be like you, or like you have it's like goals physique. So I am very careful to highlight those things to people because I will still have a lot of people, say to me, and especially, I've just finished competing last weekend. So many people will talk about, how amazing this is and that they want to, be able to achieve that as well. And some of these people truly believe that this is a physique that, you should be striving for and that it's sustainable. And like you said, it's really hard to diet. And that's coming from the pros. Like the last 6 years of my career has involved, pretty crazy dieting and being extremely lean. And for some of that, like I can openly admit the thing that was driving me to do that was a disorder that I didn't want to tackle. So that it was truly steering the ship in that sense. So, as I had recovered and going through recovery, I would say that you ever fully recover. You just get better at managing the symptoms and cope. You have better coping strategies. But, the longer that I have done it and I'm moving away from that disordered viewpoint, my interest and my, I guess, willingness to invest my time and effort in that sport has actually dissipated because I don't have that like identity wrapped around that lean physique anymore. I'm no longer, valuing myself as a human through that sport. Like I realize that regardless of how I look on my physical exterior, like I'm enough. I have, all these great things. I have degrees, I'm already, a very valuable member of our society. And I don't think that I truly believed that for a long time. So this very recent competition that I did, it was the first time that I can say I truly desired to do the competition out of desire to win the sport, not to get to the physique at the end and try and maintain it. So it was a really scary process because part of me was terrified that I just wouldn't have the self-discipline anymore to do what is necessary. Like I felt like, hey, all the people that I've ever worked with as a client, I hear these struggles, there's their day-to-day, difficulties in not being able to be adherent. And there was a little part of me that was like, wow, now I really have an appreciation for what it might be like for somebody that isn't being fueled with a disorder. They've got normal thoughts, they have normal priorities, their body isn't everything. And thankfully, I still could do it. But man, it was just a very different experience when you don't, you're not obsessed with the outcome, or you're not hung up on, that end goal.
How, Holly, and I kind of have two more questions, but one that just came to mind, like how important is it to have a supportive partner?
In your weight loss goals or any goal, I think, for
I'm
sport.
just gonna go in any
Yeah.
goal.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Because I watch you and Lane, the back and forth, you work together, you're in the same industry. And when I think back to the people that, like, often on an intake form, say for a patient, like the thing that she'll put is the most, the thing that was going to help her the most in her goal, and she checks the box that says my spouse.
Mm-hmm.
But then interestingly, in the nuances of the conversation, they're maybe not actually on the same path they are health wise, and they maybe aren't as supportive as we kind of originally thought. Like how vital has that been to you?
Yeah, look, I think whether it's like a romantic partner, whether it's friendships, whether it's work colleagues, I think the people that you spend the most amount of time with are going to have a huge influence on, your life, your career, how you are as a person. So having people that are supportive in your endeavors is incredibly important. I've certainly had my fair share of people in my own life that haven't been supportive, and not just specifically in like the field of bodybuilding, but even insofar as me stepping outside and opening my own clinic practice, or moving countries, or going off to do this other kind of extreme or scary thing. And it's very difficult to apply yourself to any goal if you haven't got a support. What I would say is that if you're surrounded by, it might be just one individual, you probably need to be able to distance yourself from them, or at least be very open to setting clear boundaries. I know that in the past, I've really struggled as somebody, and that's I'm very much a people pleaser. I want people to be to feel comfortable and to like me. I think most of us innately have that desire. But as I have gotten older, I think being able to set those clear boundaries and say what is upsetting to you, and if people can't respect that, that says a lot about that relationship. How much do they really value you? And yeah, I think if I didn't have the supports that I did, and Elaine has been incredibly supportive for all of my competitions, man, it would be tough. But I can say, even as far as like, you can look at the support with your relationships, but something else that I think can support your goals is your environment and your social life. And for me, again, I'm talking from the perspective of having had an eating disorder. Having moved to America and have now 2 children who eat beautifully fun foods for their, school lunches, and we've got all the fun cereals, and, they have their good treats and their healthy treats. But for me, I really struggled with that environment for the first couple of years being here in the US, because I was used to having this sanitized environment. Like everything was like carved out to be perfect so that I wouldn't, binge eat or overconsume these foods that I felt like I had no control around. So like knowing that I'm going to be in, like I am married to somebody that has children, I'm not about to say, throw all that stuff away. So that was really a bit of a key for me to going, you need to work through these issues, and recognize, how to build a supportive environment, so that you can work through it. So yeah, I think in addition to having good supports, friendships, relationships, you also need to be able to build around you an environment that is safe. And that, if you are struggling with certain things, whilst you are working on that from the psychological standpoint, maybe with your therapist or your dietitian or whomever it might be, that you also have to have those conversations with the environments and the social, people that you spend time with, to support what you need to get through that.
I love that answer. And you're right. Like the people are just part of that environment, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I think, examining both, right? It's pretty hard to maintain your track that you're on when there's, they're Timbits, right? When they're like donuts or whatever at the office 5 days a week,
Mm-hmm.
right? And whether, you can only say no for so many days in a row before we're
Yeah.
having a Timbit or two with our coffee.
It does. And I think like the other thing that I will say a lot of people struggle with, and it's just literally reflecting back on the people that I'm working with at the moment, there's a huge element now, I think after having had COVID, and everybody was very much, indoors, there wasn't a whole lot of communication. Now everything's opened back up. And I think people are really appreciative of their relationships and their social life and their social well-being. So I have almost seen a big shift to people being extremely social. And, if you also have health goals at the same time, and I think both of those things are important. I know for me, my social health is an incredibly important part of my overall well-being. So I've even had to try and find or strike a bit of a balance between making sure that I get out of the house and I, go and have a couple of glasses of wine on the weekends. But I also see the danger is in that, not because it's inherently bad and that I can't fit it into my macros, but you can easily let things kind of escalate and get out of hand. And then you find yourself at another restaurant and you're picking at all these things. So being able to kind of, stand back and reflect on, what are the behaviors or the circumstances in my life that might be negatively impacting my success towards this goal. And then deciding, okay, I'm not going to quit on some of these things. I'm not going to say, no, completely no. I don't know that that's always the right way to look at it, because it needs to be sustainable. And if you're somebody that enjoys eating cake or, you love pizza and you want to be able to have those things, you then just have to start looking through, I guess, your day-to-day checklist and prioritize, how important is that social event? How important is going and having that pizza this weekend? And I guess calculating and making an informed decision from there, because it's so easy to just get caught up in the yes, yes, yes. And then you find yourself going backwards in those goals.
The last thing I wanted to get you to comment on, Holly, is so many women feel like their metabolism is broken. We hear this narrative online that metabolisms are broken, they don't work. Women are eating so little and nothing happens. And we touched on it a little bit earlier, but one of the things you're best known for is your work and research in preventing metabolic adaptation that happens as women diet slash thinking about reverse dieting. I wanted to touch on this because I want women to feel like there's hope for themselves and their bodies and their metabolism, if we think about it as another person. And should they pursue that as a health goal, that this is something that is possible. And as a big reminder, you can do that while you pursue your mental health goals as well.
I would love for you to just touch on that, because I do think that women often can feel a bit hopeless, especially if they've never worked with someone and don't realize the value of being supported by someone in those endeavors. I'd love for you to just share that one piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I think women, oh my gosh, we're so hard on ourselves. And I think a lot of us have spent years and years and years, trying to lose the same 10 pounds. And it seems to happen over and over and over again. And usually it's not something that's hormonal. I think everybody tends to go, well, my hormones, I'm older now, my body is changing. And whilst, yes, that is true, as we get a little bit older, we start to see some decreases in our testosterone. Women are going through menopause, and we're having all these huge hormonal fluctuations. But if you are on top of your health and you're working with your doctor, hopefully you're working with an endocrinologist. If you are somebody that is starting to have, those menopausal type symptoms, or if you're feeling really bizarre, go to your doctor, get some blood work. Let's get some hard data so that you can rectify those hormonal problems if they exist and get you back into the normal reference ranges. And then your ability to actually execute a fat loss phase is no different to anybody else. Some of the challenges that are going to come up for women that are a little older, so I'll say 40 plus, I know that's not that old, but that's when we start to see some changes in one's ability to retain muscle. You do need to start to focus on slightly higher protein intake. But outside of that, when it comes to dieting, there is nothing different from you and a 25-year-old. You might have a few knee problems, or as we get a little bit older, our bodies are moving around as well, but it doesn't mean that you can't have some incredible results. So when it comes to fat loss, I think the biggest mistake that a lot of people make is trying to do things too quickly. We're all impatient. No one has time to kind of wait for the fat loss to come off. They want it yesterday. So one of the things that we really encourage when it comes to our coaching clients is to make sure that your weight loss isn't exceeding, say, 1.5% of your body weight per week. And if you can do that, everybody do your math, you can work out what that is for your individual body weight. But it probably feels very slow. Some people are so used to seeing like kilos drop every week, and we kind of have to explain to them, if you do it that way, would you be okay with knowing that some of that probably actually isn't even body fat that's being lost? It's actually your lean tissue. So that's what you risk doing. You're risking losing lean body mass, your muscle mass, your organ mass starts to decrease, and your metabolism starts to adapt at a significantly greater rate when we diet aggressively like that. So that's one of the first steps in that fat loss journey that can help you. And the reason that muscle is so important when you diet is because that is one of the greatest drivers of your basal metabolic rate. That keeps your energy requirements high, and that enables you to eat more food. Like, that's great. Who doesn't want to be able to diet on more food? So that's where the resistance training piece comes in. And I think a lot of people have done, and I was one of them, a cardio bunny for the longest time. I did a lot of endurance running and classes. I think I used to do the Les Mills, all those things. But I realized that, that type of training isn't going to, or wasn't going to, provide enough like mechanical tension and resistance to result in hypertrophy. So when you're dieting, obviously making sure that you're doing a solid evidence-based resistance training program, you're following a high protein diet, and you're not losing weight really aggressively, but beyond what I mentioned before. So if you can do that, there's still evidently going to become a point where you kind of hit your calorie floor. You're going to get to a point where you are really struggling to reduce your calories any further. And that's normal. That's your body is adapting. But what tends to happen after a fat loss phase, and let's say we use the example of someone that did do it really extreme, it puts them in a greater risk of, I guess, rebounding. And your body is already in this interesting hormonal milieu where we've got lots of changes to your appetite regulating hormones. We've got different things happening. I guess all of the hormones are starting to change, actually. So when we now reintroduce calories, and if you've been restricting for a long time, you may have experienced some hyperphagia, which is when your body desires more energy than it actually requires due to the longevity of dieting itself. We are almost primed to regain a lot of body fat. And if too many calories come back in too quickly, we can actually cause our fat cells to divide. So it's called adipocyte hyperplasia. And now we're creating more fat cells than we had originally. which means we have greater potential for more fat storage. So if you then eat a whole lot of food after dieting extremely, aggressively, you're actually potentially putting on more body fat than you would have, in the former version of yourself. So I think dieting down in a nice, slow and controlled way is really important, coupled with, resistance training, consistency of all of those things. And then when you do decide that, hey, I'm kind of starting to feel like I'm struggling with this, I can't really do any more activity because of my commitments and other responsibilities. And yeah, it's getting a little bit hard to kind of eat at that low amounts, and that's normal. Then that might be the time when you do a little bit of a reverse diet, and that is the gradual reintroduction of calories to help induce some positive adaptations. So your metabolism will adapt back to a slightly higher calorie target, but not necessarily put it back on any body fat. It's kind of an interesting thing that we can do. And sometimes when you reintroduce those calories, which is always scary after a diet because you don't want to put the body fat back on. But what can happen is if you do it slow enough, you end up feeling so much better. Your performance in your exercise goes back up. You're motivated again because you're not feeling so fatigued and exhausted. And you start to, really see some big improvements in your exercise output. And some people actually continue to lose weight, even though their calories are going up and up and up because of that, improved performance and everything's starting to work very well again. So then they start adding muscle instead of body fat, and their body really changes and it looks and feels great. So I think all's to say, metabolic adaptation is a real thing. It happens for people that do fat loss diets repeatedly over and over and over without giving themselves time to kind of take a break from dieting. So I think, to mitigate some of the extreme symptoms of dieting, there are certainly better approaches as integrating some of the diet breaks that we know of, which are basically just periods at maintenance where you bring some calories back in. And that is proposed and shown in the research to help mitigate some of those negative adaptations. So, if you can incorporate those into the fat loss plan, also be really realistic with, okay, now's enough. I've done a good job in this short period of time. Let me take a break or let me reverse diet for a bit. And then over time, if you can integrate that process of fat loss and reverse dieting, ultimately, you're going to see hopefully some improvements in your lean body mass, decreases in your fat mass, and increases in your calories. So to me, it's a win-win. You're achieving better health, you're losing body fat, you're adding muscle, and hopefully, if you correctly reverse diet out of those fat loss phases, you can get to some really incredible calorie amounts and feel great. So, and that's regardless of who you are, whether you're 25, whether you're 55, it is still certainly possible for all of those people to have a successful fat loss and reverse phase.
There's so many things there that you said that I feel like is pretty helpful. I mean, this is a more hopeful conversation. I think people probably have felt like they've spent a lifetime at war with their bodies and not feeling like they understand it. I think what you said there was beautifully put, that it's a complicated conversation, right? Scientifically, what's happening to our bodies as we put it through various phases of nutrition is pretty complex, which it's no wonder that you can't just like grab the diet of the person in the cubicle beside you and expect the same results, right? It's no wonder that you can't read that book by Dr. So-and-so and do their special diet and apply that to your life and get the results you're looking for. The other thing I want to call out is that this is a process, right? You mentioned there that this takes time. We're talking about long phases. We're talking about seasons of nutrition, right? And when we think about an athlete who says, I'm going to work on this season and this season, and I'm going to recover from my shoulder injury this season, that feels very natural, and we would maybe expect those periods of time that they're doing those things to be quite long. And yet so many women pursue their dieting 100% of the time with 100% effort without thinking about the seasonality of the way we need to consider changes to our body and body composition to actually have the kind of impact that we're hoping.
Yeah.
And so what you said there really was that is something that actually takes quite some time. And there are some very specific touch points that probably need to be made, whether that's with a professional or even just checking in with how you're feeling and where your goals are. But this isn't like a 21-day fix.
I know. And it's so frustrating. As I was actually in the grocery store just this morning, and right there on the magazines, as you go through the checkout, there are still people like promoting these 30-day like detoxes and, lose 50 pounds in, 20 days or something crazy like that. So, to me, that really bothers me because it is a process. And for the most part, if we're looking at let's say it's someone wants to do a 16-week diet, which probably makes sense if you're going to also incorporate some, periods at maintenance. So if you take 4 diet breaks and then you do 16 weeks of dieting, you've already got a 20-week window. So let me use an example. If we've got somebody that is 180 pounds and they're wanting to lose, let's say they want to go at that very top percentage, so about 1.5% of their body weight per week. So that would be about 2.7 pounds. That would be the goal for each week of that fat loss. So technically speaking, over 16 weeks, they could come up to maybe 43 pounds of fat loss if we had 4 diet breaks scattered throughout. So for that individual, working at that percentage, 40 pounds, that's reasonable. But if we've got, a 120-pound woman who wants to lose, a good amount of weight, and she wants to lose weight at that kind of speed, 1.8 pounds per week, she would not need to diet nearly that many weeks. So I think, kind of mapping things out and having a look at what realistically would this look like if I was to diet for this many weeks and not exceed those percentages that we know are not, efficacious or safe. How would it realistically look? And I love to do forecasting for clients so that I can show them, hey, based on where your current body weight is, in 16 weeks, if we target this moderate rate of loss, this is what you could potentially get to. And even if we do map it out and set some kind of expectations, you still don't know how somebody's metabolism is going to adapt, because we've got equations that we can use to kind of predict exactly how many calories, to create a certain calorie deficit. But if someone has a lifetime history of dieting, like you said, so many women, they're perpetually dieting. If they're not dieting, like they're anxious and stressed, so then they're dieting in 2 weeks, So if that has been their history, their body is likely to have developed this extremely robust self-defense mechanism that, once we get down to a certain calorie point and a certain amount of activity, it's like our bodies become so efficient. And it's like, I compare this to the economy car and like a big like diesel truck. Like the economy car seemingly can travel thousands of miles on virtually nothing compared to a big truck that, runs on diesel and is just like throwing it out like, stripper money, it's really crazy to think how our bodies adapt. So, I think time is so important. And I know that people think, well, but I saw this person do this amount of weight loss in this short time. And, oh, but my friend did this type of diet and that was successful for her. But, you are an individual and your body is going to do what your body does based on your lifestyle. And you could have 2 individuals that look exactly the same. They are the same weight. Maybe they do, I don't know, the same, nutrition. They eat the same types of food, but maybe one of them is a busy mom and she's on her feet all day and gets 20,000 steps running errands and doing after school activities. And, she's doing her training. The other person might have a sedentary office job where they're not moving at all. They get 3,000 steps in a day. And then their choices of activity might be significantly different as well. So they're not expending the same amount of calories. So I think being realistic with your goals and the time and what you can actually do with your exercise to get to that goal, and then plan out, as long as the diet, a reverse diet period to kind of give yourself not only the psychological break that it needs, like that would be, I think a lot of people think that they should be able to just keep pushing and, bulldozing through and like, I can deal with it. I don't need another break. I'll just keep going. But your body needs the break. You need the time to recover your hormones. And for most people, when we get extremely lean, we've got low leptin. You're extremely hungry all the time. We've got changes to our thyroid hormones. We've got changes to our sex hormones. Your testosterone goes to like very low amounts when you're dieting all the time. So of course, your energy levels are going to feel tanked. Your sleeping is disturbed. So I usually try to have clients spend an equal amount of time, either reverse dieting or just at maintenance before they even consider getting back into fat loss. And then they have an effective fat loss that second time. So it's almost like you do windows of 20 weeks. Like that's realistic. So I think for anybody that has a big goal, don't give up on that goal, but set yourself your timeline and, try to work towards those weekly goals rather than standing at the beginning and looking at, wow, I've still got 80 pounds I want to lose. Like break it into chunks and then, focus on those little bits at a time, I think is extremely important.
I'm so grateful for you to share both sides of that coin, Holly, the mental health side and that pursuit of leanness and the impact that has had on yourself, but also has on so many women. Mm-hmm. But then also that exercise and nutritional physiology and how I think knowing a lot more about that would probably set some women free mm-hmm. in some of their thoughts about themselves and their nutrition and their body. And so having those two conversations together, in my opinion, are actually quite important. I would love if you could share with us, what's that lasting message you want our listeners to carry forward from you, but also what's next for you. I just want you to touch on that too, and how we can find you.
Sure. I would say for anybody that has struggled with body fat loss, if you've struggled with body image, if you're just feeling not good about yourself and you're struggling with, lack of life luster. Don't neglect your mental health. There's so many things that you can do. There are so many resources. There's so many books. There's so many accounts online. If you cannot afford to go to a psychologist, because let's be real, they are expensive. There is so much work that you can do as an individual to improve your mindset and to change your life. It doesn't just have to be through, brutal, hard dieting and through training. I'm not saying that those things aren't important. I think there is some huge value to having a regular exercise routine. And there is so much value for health outside of the aesthetic to have a, nutritious diet and, but still be able to explore all of the fun things in life as well, eating out, having a glass of wine, just those things are really important for our souls too. So if you can spend as much time working on your mental health as your, diet and exercise routines, I just can't describe in words how much more productive you are going to be in both of those endeavors. Because for a lot of people, it is the lack of psychological progress that keeps them stuck in this cycle of not being able to make progress on their physical goals. So spend an equal amount of time on your mental health. And then as far as where you can find me, everything that we offer, I guess our nutrition coaching app, our, training platform, our supplements, our educational books, coursework, all that type of thing, they are available on my Instagram, which is just Holly T. Baxter. Sorry.
Amazing. Thank you for spending this time with me today, Holly. It's been so nice to connect with you and to get you to share that message for our listeners. I know it's such an important one.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful speaking with you, Jordan.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Women's Health Unplugged. We're changing things in women's health. One episode, one topic, one conversation at a time. I want you to feel confident in your health. Please remember that the podcast does not constitute a medical relationship or medical advice. Please talk to your family doctor, your practitioner, your specialist, or anyone on your health team if you think some of the topics we discussed in today's episode apply to you. Take care of yourself. Until next time.